All right, I think we're still loading up here. We'll see if the YouTube kicks in here in a second.
Cool. I see the live red light on the top.
I think we're good there. All right, I think we're still loading up here. We'll see if the YouTube kicks in here in a second. Cool. All right, so we are live. There's a little bit of a delay to YouTube, but all good. So anyway, thank you for joining there, eVTOL fan. We've kind of been talking about this offline for a bit, and really excited to finally put this together and start to have our first live stream, obviously, and share some thoughts and feedback on this week's news, which was pretty big with the simulators and the factory. But yeah, moreover, just as a place, hopefully here on YouTube, to share a little bit more of the message that, for the most part, for myself, have been doing through X. But kind of getting back to the roots where I started with Arna, I'm doing this a couple of years ago on YouTube. I think it adds another element. And of course, we've got some things queued up to show people, to lean on some links, some videos, some commentary from Joe Ben, also some quotes from Bonnie Simi that were in some of these announcements. But yeah, thank you so much for joining here. What are you looking forward to most for the conversation?
Well, I'm looking forward to Phil Zale 2532, who is the first person in the chat. So there's definitely some history being made here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this. It's going to be cool that people who don't speak English are going to be able to understand and engage. And I know that's happening in the Joby Reddit. So yeah, this is going to be great. It's going to allow us to have some conversations in real time as if there's any breaking news. So that's going to be great too. And I know we've got some good topics already in the queue, but it'll be fun to see where the conversation takes us in chat. If there's anyone who wants to talk about a topic that we haven't covered before, that'd be fun too.
Yeah, no, it's I think the piece about touching the international Joby audience is going to be pretty neat. Hopefully YouTube does everything right with the dubbing, but obviously a huge community in Japan and South Korea. I think there's obviously a growing community there in Dubai and UAE. So hopefully they will also be able to join and contribute here. But yeah, without further ado, we will kick off with the first topic that we have pulled up, and go ahead and share here. But pretty exciting when we got this news on Tuesday that Joby was preparing the first set of pilot training with the CAE flight simulators. So they're the first one, which is the level 7, as they've called it, a training device, is being installed this month. But that we will also have later in the year the full motion simulator. And of course, both of those will feed into the pilot training. That's going to be up to 250 pilots a year. And they didn't give a timeline on what that'll look like for that 250 pilot per year capacity. But I'm just going to read a quote here, and then we can kind of dig in deeper, as we've had some thoughts on this already. But this is a quote from Bonnie Simi, of course, president of operations for Joby. And she said, "These simulators are central to the FAA certification process and are being delivered on time to support pilot training ahead of Joby's first commercial flights planned for this year. Developing flight simulators that are fully qualified by the FAA takes years of work and access to aircraft data, and it is required for Part 135 operations of eVTOL aircraft in the United States. Having started this multi-year process with CAE in 2022, Joby is progressing in developing qualified, scalable pilot training infrastructure as we near commercial operations." And so I think, something for me from Bonnie's quote that is so crucial, and we can kind of dig in here, but that these simulators aren't just something that you can buy off the shelf. You can't buy the data off the shelf, so to speak. This requires, a fleet of aircraft that has flown, let's just say, for instance, over 50,000 miles, like Joby has done with the S4 platform. And all of that is what is going to feed these CAE simulators. And that's down to, the weather, vibration of turbulence on the aircraft itself, all sorts of different factors that are going to be included into these simulators, that it is literally, as Bonnie has been quoted in some recent clips from the company, that it will be indistinguishable for the pilots of being inside the plane versus inside, in particular, that full motion simulator. So anyway, I was really excited to hear this news. I'll just scroll down to highlight or to show a couple of the key highlights that the article pulled out. But what was your biggest take when you saw this? Obviously, we've seen talk about the simulators for a couple of years now, but in the original announcement. But yeah, what was your biggest takeaway?
I thought it was interesting. You got more granular detail about the simulators. There's two of them, right? There's the level 7 and is it the C class simulator? The one that's going to be the big one that's like full, what you've seen in the movies when pilots get in. And then the level 7 seemed to incorporate some new technology from CAE. And I'm thinking back to the SFAR where they set the rules, and there was kind of like some of that language that said that they would also be, I think, they would make rules based on the data that they were getting and interaction with industry. And it seemed to mark like a new way for the FAA to go through flight certification. And I think we're starting to see some of that strategy. And then if you watch some of the videos or read through some of the interviews, it's really interesting how the actual way that they're going to do the training for pilots and how they want them to get into the plane early, to do vertical takeoff, because then you get a feel for it, and then to go back and do more simulator. And I think initially, if you were going back to the old rules for the FAA, not, for just other modes of flight, it was more prescriptive. You had to, or dogmatic. You had to go through and do all the before you got into the plane, you had to go through and do a ton of flight simulation. So it's kind of interesting to see how, the innovation that's happening on the plane, in the battery, in terms of the service, in terms of the bags getting to the airport, all, just innovation across the board. And so that was something that I thought was interesting. We're starting to see how the FAA maybe is working with industry, and that second simulator that's not as high end seems to be able to be used, and maybe there'll be more virtual stuff too, and you've got the Apple headset, and maybe you don't even need, some of the things that you do. There's all the gaming setups where you see people doing those race car gaming setups, and that looks like you're in an F1 car. You put on an Apple Vision headset and you get some fans blowing air, and maybe you can simulate that. So anyway, those were some of my observations. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, no, I think, as for me, as looking at what Joby has done over a long period of time, setting up, and I think in particular, Bonnie used the term infrastructure, and usually that's meant to be something that's more, core or foundational to whatever endeavor that it's referencing. And they've been very coy about things up until this point, and only, as we saw in 2025, really started to ramp up both the marketing efforts. But I think sharing more of, if you weren't a complete Joby nerd like we are, on a more broader scale, the depth of what they have built. And, for these simulators, I think the other big piece is once they have the first simulator, obviously, which is the level 7, and then they get the level C later in the year. What I'll be curious is, do we see the next simulators arrive, in the Middle East? Because as I've said for some time, and before we heard that Dayton was expanding, but I do think, sooner than later, there'll have to be some type of footprint there in the Middle East, whether UAE or Saudi Arabia, just because of what the plans are in those markets. The regulators are leaned in so heavily. So
yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring up that point of Didi had talked about regional manufacturing was going to be important for Joby, and I know every topic we stray from our kind of agenda, it could be another hour rabbit hole, but I thought it was interesting that the CAE contract was so early, right? That it could be a leading indicator of Joby's manufacturing evolution. If they do go regional, they're going to need 2 more simulators, or 1 more simulator, or 1 for each market, probably, right? If they're going to build and make a hub out of the UAE or Saudi Arabia or Japan, it would make sense that they do flight training there too. I mean, you could do it in Marina, right? They've built, part of that new expansion was to put in the flight school, but I'd be curious to see if this is like a 2-year leading indicator for regional expansion. If we get a press release and they're adding another CAE flight simulator.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think also kind of to going back to the infrastructure piece, I think you're right on. And Joby usually, is pretty quiet about things until they're really loud about it. And these simulators, there's such a huge lead time, and it's so specific. This is not even building a vertiport where it's, if you've got the construction capability, you could build it out. This is something this is why they built that whole fleet that they have currently, not just towards getting to certification in the physical sense of building the hardware, that physical asset, but also the software that's going to underlie, again, they could build 1,000 S4s if you don't have a proper pilot program to actually feed that fleet and a set of aircraft. You really don't have a business, certainly not, one that the valuations and other things that Joby has. So I think where I'm excited is the fact that we saw, this week, both the simulators being unveiled in terms of being installed at Marina, but that just happened to coincide with, what we saw there with the expansion in Dayton. And I can kind of switch gears over into that announcement as well.
Oh, hey, Travis, sorry. Before we do manufacturing, can I just say one more thing on the flight training?
Sure.
Do you think we know that the executive team, there's a bunch of pilots. Bonnie's a pilot. I'm not sure about Eric Allison, but if you look at, if you're on LinkedIn, you'll see people celebrating getting their pilot's licenses. I don't know. That might be an interesting metric for the shareholder letter. How many employees actually are pilots? Do you think Joe Ben would ever do a Kyle Clark and fly one of these S4s, or maybe Bonnie?
I think Bonnie, she had talked about how excited she was to get into the simulator.
Yeah.
I think somewhere along the process or not, Bonnie will, I would almost say certainly would get behind the sticks of the S4 eventually.
Yeah.
She's flown aircraft that are much more difficult and much more to manage. So it'd be probably one of the more enjoyable experiences as a pilot, separate from, her helping to discover and bring this company to market. But it's a great point. I mean, I've said this several times about the leadership, that you see that I believe almost everyone on the executive team is either an engineer, a pilot, or both. And that's obviously not a requirement, but I think it just, tells you where their mind's at, how they're developing this company, the way that they're thinking about it. And, when you see that, even like the new CFO, Rodrigo, he's a pilot. He's got that's few pictures you can find online, is him flying. And so I think, who knows if Joe Ben, I'm sure he'll be in the simulators. I don't know if it's ever been.
I don't think he's going to be allowed to.
Yeah, his pilot license. Yeah, there might also be some key man risk on that side as well. Yeah. Not that the aircraft isn't safe, but who knows? We'll see. I was kind of joking to myself when I saw Bonnie on the Joby. Actually, just they posted something if we're talking about the simulators.
Yeah.
But I said to myself, that would be peak, Joby shareholder moment, is to be able to fly with Bonnie behind the controls. Obviously, Zach Reeder and Buddy Denham or Peter Buzzer Wilson, anybody that is any of the Joby pilots, would be an honor to be on board the aircraft with them. But Bonnie, what a story for her. Just the arc of her becoming a commercial pilot, and then everything that led to at JetBlue, and then JetBlue Ventures, and that's how she found Joe Ben and Joby, and the rest is history. But yeah, really exciting that you have the leadership involved with the training itself. So I'm sure Bonnie was instrumental in also just how the process had happened, because I went through and tried to model out. I found the aircraft that she flew as a commercial pilot, and she has done at least a couple hundred hours of required training. She's probably done more than that over, I think she was a pilot for 3 decades. But anyway, yeah, just extremely exciting to see that lean in from the leadership.
I'll put the a link in chat to that video that Joby put out on the 7th. And if you don't know who Bonnie Simi is, you'll get a good kind of snapshot of who she is. It's like a minute or two. And the thing that stood out to me was just how she was smiling and so happy, talking about, the simulator experience in her 3 decades of flying. So I don't know, my money's on her to get in that plane. She's an Olympic athlete. She's got a competitor's mindset, and she obviously loves to fly. So I can't imagine she's not going to get in there somewhere. We may not ever hear about it, but I bet she's going to fly that thing.
Yeah, and it was. I think it actually was in the recent announcement. I had to scroll through to find it, but the reference was that it doesn't matter. Obviously, they're looking specifically towards military and commercial pilots currently, but that the focus was not just specifically on. I think people might think that it lends itself more to a helicopter pilot than a fixed wing pilot, the S4, in terms of the eVTOL portion of it. But actually, they're looking for both. And that's going to be both rotorcraft pilots and fixed wing pilots. Really anybody with a commercial pilot's license. So I think that flexibility is also really key to the process, because you want to have as much of a surface area for possible pilots. And Bonnie had mentioned she's only been on a couple earnings calls, but I believe it was the earnings call that she did earlier in 2025, where she had said there's a couple hundred of the first cadre of pilots that were already kind of identified. And I think recently, with this announcement, Peter Buswell-Wilson had said that there's 10 pilots that are currently qualified on the S4 aircraft, and we know most of them from the videos. But yeah, just I think there's a lot more to come with the simulators, and the fact that it took so much of a lead time, and then now we're already here. Is obviously it's taken some time, but now that we're here, it's really good timing. And with that, I think I'll shift, if you're good, to the manufacturing footprint.
I'm just going to sneak one more thing in. Sorry to do this, but I just was thinking, how cool is it going to be? Like when you think about the defense leg of the stool and that S4T, and you think about how much the government spends on training fighter pilots, helicopter pilots, and how the turnover in those roles really impacts. I mean, I think, I don't quote me on this, but I think the fighter pilots, it's like $1 million investment. That's why they get bonuses for staying on longer, and, losing a fighter pilot with that kind of training. But imagine like if these S4s are as easy to fly as it seems, and you can ramp someone up in 3 weeks or 6 weeks. That's going to be a game changer for, and then, obviously unmanned, that'll be the real big game changer. But in the interim period, is messy middle, if you're in the Defense Department and you can get your pilots up to speed in 6 weeks, I mean, that's incredible, right? That means your attrition is no longer an issue. You can always train someone else. And then maybe in an emergency situation too, people can just jump in and, get coached on how to get out of harm's way, or, extract from a difficult situation.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a huge piece of, and that's, again, these are just the first 2 simulators that we know of, but, you'd have to presume at, Wright-Patterson, obviously you've got AFWorks and AFRIL heavily invested and involved. Of course, it's the Air Force Research Wing. They're near Dayton. So yeah, a lot more to come on that side. So with that, I will shift over and, kind of tie in, as we were alluding to before, but, exciting to see this week that you have both the pilot side of things, obviously ramping up with the simulators. That was crucial, regardless of that 6-week training period or not, you need the simulators. But I think the timing of having this, coincide with expanding the manufacturing footprint in Dayton is quite significant. And they didn't draw those 2 parallels because usually they're pretty coy about what they say. But I think it's pretty clear, if you think about that timing, why you would be scaling to be able to train 250 pilots. Obviously, you have, with duty times and things, you need more than 1 pilot to fly if you're going to have the aircraft running all day. But you definitely don't need 250 pilots unless you have a significant fleet. And so when you see that they not only have a new facility in Dayton, I think everybody would have been happy if they said, hey, we're breaking ground on a new 700,000 square foot facility. That would have been awesome as is, because we already know that they have enough space. There's over the space that they have in Dayton would allow for up to 2 million square feet of manufacturing. That was in the original announcement. But to see that instead of building from the ground up, and I posted about this, right now is such a critical time for the company with certification. Obviously, in you can taste it; it's so close. Obviously, in Dubai, things are ramping up, but also around the UAE, there multiple vertiports there in Dubai, but also in RAC. So I think when I see this, the fact that they chose, and unless they have the most incredible luck on the planet, you wouldn't find 700,000 square feet 6 minutes from your other production plant if that wasn't already part of the conversation. And so what I think, too, is important is where the USPS building that they bought in Dayton that they've converted, that's where the conforming propellers are being built. It is a smaller facility. I mean, it's 200,000 square feet, but smaller compared to this. And it seems like this is a much more flexible space. So to me, this is a pretty strong signal. And, when they say 4 aircraft per month in 2027, that might be, where it lands. And even that, I think I would be excited about, because this is going to, take time. They aren't just, this isn't building a car or an electric vehicle, even at that, right? This is a, high performance aircraft that's got to be commercially certified. But moreover, that the fact when you see what they're doing in the beginning of 25, they doubled it to 2 per month. And then we saw at the end of the year, they doubled it again. I don't think they're probably telling us actually how much capacity they have. They have no requirement to do that for shareholders or otherwise. They can certainly guide, which is what they always do. But for me, I think we're starting to see the beginning of what will end up being that 500 aircraft per year, long-term projection of manufacturing. I think we will start to see more of that, because when you look back, and I have to check my notes, but I believe in 2024, I believe that they delivered 3 or 4 aircraft already. Now, some of those were in progress, but things are significantly ramped up since then. So anyway, really curious what your biggest takeaways were from them just getting a 700,000 square foot factory.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Like, I'll say my piece, but I'm going to put you on the spot, because I remembered you posted about like the footprint near that postal facility, and you kind of marked out like the potential expansion at the airport. And so I kind of had that as my original framing. And then I was thinking, maybe end of December 2026, that would be when we'd hear them talk about, the construction would start. And then I was so tunnel visioned into they're going to build something. Archer built a brand new facility, so I thought, that's the playbook. I don't know why I didn't expect that they could find, a big open space that's already built out. I mean, that shows you how little I know about the Ohio aerospace industry, and I'm trying to ramp my knowledge. I know Ohio State's like a top school. I know everything from what Joby's talked about, from the initial announcement, the lean in from the Jobs Ohio people, and the senator from Ohio, Hunstead, I think is his name. But yeah, I was thinking that was a surprise for me. I mean, I thought maybe we'd hear about manufacturing alliance with Toyota. But and then, as you started to see the CES, you sort of figured maybe there'd be some kind of announcement to go along with something that visible. And we got the news about, they're buying a turnkey solution. It was even bigger than I expected, 730,000 square feet. And I think the math has changed for me, because now all of a sudden they've told us they're buying equipment, and they're buying a new place. We also heard Joe Ben talk about in one of the panel discussions, I think at CES, that they were at near capacity. And I don't know, I want to be careful, but I think my first read was that he was talking about the Dayton propeller, the parts piece was at capacity. And I thought, wow, if that's the case, that's a really fast ramp for that workforce. I know they have a lot of open positions in Dayton. But it could also have been related to just the total footprint. So Dayton plus Marina plus anything else they have, they're nearing capacity. And that's what Joe Ben was saying. But if they're at capacity, building propellers in that Dayton facility, and then now they're going to break ground here, to me, man, that's exciting news. That brings forward when they can, go from 5 to 10 to 20 to 50 to 100 to 200 to 400. And so that is really exciting. I don't know if that brings revenue forward substantially. I don't know if it just means that they can exponentially grow faster than their competitors and serve more markets and establish the brand and service and give people a great experience, when they start to see advanced air mobility for themselves and go on those flights. But that was super exciting. You've always talked about how they're not going to be demand constrained. They're going to be supply of S4 constrained. And then my head just blows up thinking about if they are fortunate enough to have a solution for the Defense Department, for the Department of War, and there is more production that's going to be allocated to serving, that a contract or something of that nature. So I think they're in fantastic position. I think they've given us a sense of how confident they are. Bowles was saying how, they're trying to get that right balance between, you can't build too soon. You don't want to sit there with a factory that's not being used and all the overhead and hiring people and retaining them while you're waiting to build, to build things. It sounds like they're threading the needle. And this was a fantastic opportunity, and it was economical and it was faster to market. And they already have a presence in Ohio. They've got the state behind them. I mean, this is a phenomenally good signal for me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, something that for me, I didn't know if you were going there or not in calling out that, with Joby, you have to, especially with Joe Ben, he knows so much that I think half the time he just has to be very careful what he's saying. But he is so smart and has thought about this for so long. And when I saw this facility acquisition by Joby, I was like, oh man, this is incredible. They don't have to build this thing from scratch. It's already, operable. Obviously they have to fill it with equipment, and they said that were already doing it. And, we had talked offline as recently I had, looked through to see what were some, just past notes of things that have come up. And it just time and time again, I've alluded to it, but that Sandy Monroe video where he, checks out some of the companies in the eVTOL space is extremely telling. But in that interview, Sandy Monroe is over and, talking with him about, how do you think about, for scaling, how do you think about the equipment that you need to acquire? And Jobin was talking about in particular the autoclaves. Yeah. And Joby has 3 there in Marina. But Jobin, if you go back and watch the video, it's a very interesting interaction between the two, because both of their expressions and body language changes specifically when this part of the conversation happens. And, Jobin kind of cracks a smirk and says, we're really opportunistic about when we find equipment, because there's such a lead time if you want to get a new autoclave. Yeah. And Sandy Monroe kind of, makes a little hint that who knows whatever happened after that. But, I think that was a really telling moment for me that, whether it's with Sandy Monroe or some other connection, but, Jobin knows exactly what he's doing and is very clever about how he's going to deploy the capital and to ramp and scale. So yeah, when they bought this facility, just imagine like all the things that are going on in the company right now. The last thing you want to deal with is construction. And especially, even in Dayton, it's a little bit easier to build than in California, just from regulations, permits, et cetera. But, you've got in Dubai such an important construction happening with the vertiports there, and that's what's going to be super important. Marina will be able to handle, because we already know, Marina was earlier in the year that they said would be able to do 24 earlier last year, sorry, but they were going to be able to do 24 planes there. And I think that's the high end, right? That's capacity, not actual production. That Marina will be able to handle what, UAE and Dubai is going to look like, let's say for this year and next year. But all the while building out, Dayton further. I think that, there's a lot more to come with, the manufacturing side, whether it's Dayton or again, Middle East or UAE, because really quick, certification, certainly some type of flight authorization is going to happen in UAE next year. As we've talked about it, when RTA, GCAA, Crown Prince is saying it's going to happen in 2026, I'd take them for their word. But whether the FAA certification for Joby happens this year, maybe it drags on into next year because of some administrative things or whatever. Even that I don't think is super crucial to the long-term story that we have here. But really quickly, my quote that certification's a really expensive piece of paper. Manufacturing is everything. I think we're at that point, and Joe Bitten kind of alluded to it. Maybe we could play that clip and kind of go from there if you want. That talks about Jobin, why he's leaning in on Dayton and Ohio in particular. When they talk about the talent and things to build, that's what's going to be required to build these aircraft. So if you don't have anything else, we'll jump in.
While you're hunting for that clip in chat, Phil Z cracks me up. He had a comment that's worth bringing up. If we can try that feature about the manufacturing. Can you see it in chat?
Oh, the size of the garage doors.
Yeah, I tried to click on it, see if it would pull it up, but I had that same thought. I was like, wait, how are they going to get the planes out?
Yeah. Well, it's, I think what is really exciting, and it's something, and I can't remember where I saw the breakdown, but it was when they shipped or started to ship some of the aircraft. I want to say that it was 542 Juliet X-ray. But when they started to ship those overseas to Toyota and to Japan with Toyota and to South Korea, those first international demo flights, that they had to take apart the aircraft, and that they said it was short window of time. Yeah. And so I think what we'll start to see is, and I think others might have run into this problem already in the space, that you need to be really smart with obviously how you're building these aircraft, but where, what pieces. And I think you'll probably start to see like what we saw at the USPS building that Joby took over to turn into conforming propeller blade manufacturing. They said that they'll build other parts there, and that's fine. But, it's a lot. It could be clever for them to have specialized lines where instead of at every facility, you have to build you need a propeller line, you need a wing line, you need this, that, and the other, where they can really start to pool resources. And it's even better is that they're going to have this, humongous footprint soon. They're already, building it, to building the footprint that is to have, within a 10-minute drive around Dayton International Airport, which also happens to be a FedEx hub, that you would just have different buildings on this campus that are doing different things and really be able to build the planes a lot quicker. So anyway, I think, that'll be something interesting for us to highlight. I do see, I've got this over here on the side, that someone said that the volume's going quiet at times. So that might be because we don't have mics. Again, appreciate you guys dealing with this as we go through the first iteration here. But
Phil Z said the volume was fine, but we can keep monitoring it. And I cracked a lame joke that maybe we'll spin the propellers faster to make more noise.
There you go. It's impossible. The unique part of the Joby S4, those blades are spinning at when they're in cruise at about 250 RPMs, 10 times slower than what a General Aviation Cessna or something's blades would be spinning. So again, part of that acoustic profile and why they're able to be so quiet. But I love the thought, eVTOL fan. This is fantastic, and also great to see that.
Mac's in the house.
Yeah, looks like Mac has entered the chat. I know Mac had posted he'd been on a whirlwind traveling adventure for business, but it sounded like it was a successful mission. But Mac, definitely will love to have you in here next time as well. So yeah. Anyways, I've got the clip here pulled up. So this is Joby talking about Dayton and Jobs Ohio and some of these other components. So we'll go ahead and let this play. It's just about a 1.5-minute video.
Everything for us, we've been met with a surge of demand from countries around the world, and with the president's executive order and the EIPP, we can begin operating here in the US this year. So we are leaning in really hard to ramp manufacturing, and the workforce in Ohio has been absolutely spectacular. Today, we announced that we're adding another 730,000 square feet of manufacturing space in Dayton. And this is all down to the incredible depth of aerospace manufacturing talent that goes back more than 100 years from when the Wright brothers opened the first aircraft manufacturing facility in Dayton, Ohio. So that foundation, that quality, that workforce, the ability for folks to buy a really beautiful home and live in a fantastic community, and just that quality of life is so vitally important. And we've been really, really impressed with the caliber of the manufacturing talent we've been able to bring in. The Jobs Ohio team, when we were interviewing different sites, did a fantastic job of telling us how amazing that the talent we were going to be able to get in Ohio was, and that has absolutely borne out. The Jobs Ohio team did an incredible job of structuring an incentive package that was really flexible and allowed us to scale when and how we needed to. And that's exactly what you're seeing today as we're doubling down and adding an additional 730,000 square feet of manufacturing space.
So good, from the king himself, and I'll pull up here the previous announcement just to give context as we kind of look at this for everybody listening. But this is Wednesday of this week, 2026. But when we first heard about Dayton, that was in 2023. So if you think now, we're a little over 2 years past that moment of time from when Joby originally selected Dayton for their facility, that we've seen not only have they opened one of the facilities that wasn't even what they were mentioning here with the original announcement in 2023, but that when they acquired that USPS building, it's already open. That's over 200,000 square feet of space. Now they've acquired another 700,000 plus that's already built and ready, and they're going to start to fill in with the equipment. And as Mac put here in the chat too, I'm not saying that the other autoclaves have been to Dayton, but Marina does have multiple autoclaves. I've seen them with my own eyes, and that was back in 2022. If there's only one there now, that means the other ones are headed somewhere else, and that's really exciting. But yeah, I think it's really something for us to look at. But just seeing if there's any other notes here. Okay, yeah. And this is just Mac highlighting something from Marina, but that Caltrans, so California Transportation, is taking comments currently on eVTOL infrastructure and future needs and development related to eVTOLs. And it looks like that is only going through, looks like the end of this upcoming week. So a lot of support from everybody all around. But back to, in particular, to Dayton. If you see a little over 2 years' time, they've acquired 2 buildings, one of which is already spun up and building conforming parts in an important part. And as you see this other 700,000 square feet come online, I really get excited to think okay, this year, certification will be number one and alongside Dubai. But what manufacturing little nuggets or little pieces will get dropped throughout the year about what's happening in Dayton? Because I think something that we've talked about offline, eVTOL fan, was, not only does Joby talk about manufacturing and the different facilities that they have. So of course they have the main marina facility, but they also have the San Carlos facility, which is where John Wagner team does a lot of the power electronics things happening. But they also have now these two facilities in Dayton. They have some facilities for the simulation team that is in, I believe, Costa Rica, and then the other is there in Europe. And so Joby has quite a bit of footprint. What they talk about in San Carlos, I've never even heard them use that square footage in the count, and it's a little under 70,000 square feet. That's just looking on Google Maps and kind of trying to look at what that facility would be. But earlier this week, I posted that Joby's over 1.1 million square feet of manufacturing space. And actually, it's more than that. It's about 1.3. And I think that was even highlighted in a later article this past week. So anyway, when you see what they're doing here, what manufacturing is going to look like, Joby is poised to do a lot more, I think, on the manufacturing front than people think. It's quite impressive to me. This is kind of a sidebar. I don't think anybody's really touched on this. Joby had 542 Alpha Juliet, which was the aircraft that was in testing and planned testing, was an aircraft that they had lost. And part of that was testing out, and Mac, next time maybe we can pick your brain on this, because you had an opportunity to speak with Buddy Denham about this in person during your visit last year, because he was flying that aircraft, was that they were pushing the limits of the aircraft on purpose, and that they were able to discern some very specific pieces of data, maybe even something that they were surprised in terms of how good of the fidelity of the data that they got. In particular to what these aircraft can do, what are the boundary conditions. And I think that's really important. Obviously, you can do whatever with Iron Bird, you can do whatever in the simulators, but in the real world, it is good to know what the edge of the flight envelope is for these aircraft. And as you can see in the NTSB report, that Joby was fully operating under the FAA requirements. They were involved. So, people try and call this a crash or an accident. It was more of something that happened in testing. That's how I'd like to refer to it. But anyway, in the NTSB report, you do see that the part that had failed was a propeller blade. And nobody's really talked about that. The fact that they already have now the conforming blade line in Dayton is great, sure. But if that's the only piece of the aircraft that anybody could have ever pointed to potentially have questions about, pretty telling. And then, when you see manufacturing start to scale, this new facility we already just talked about today with the simulators coming online, I think Joby, the maturity of the S4 platform is really going to show through here in 2026. People are still underestimating what Joby is going to deliver this year. I personally, I don't think, either of us, have talked about how many planes, or, I don't do price targets. I don't do delivery targets, only within the ranges that they've provided in terms of the deliveries or capacity at least. But there are some really exciting things that are about to unfold that I think are already in the works, right? It's like that 700,000 square feet. It's not like they just signed that deal that day. And that's been in the works for quite some time. And so, I think for the general audience is probably, 6 months. When they see news today, they're probably 6 months behind of what's really happening. And for the Joby nerds, I think we're probably at least a couple months ahead of them, but still certainly behind, because Joby is thinking about this in the long term. But extremely exciting stuff to see out of this facility. I mean, we could talk about it for quite some time. You have anything, eVTOL fan, little nuggets or things that you thought were important about this week's news that were maybe were beneath the surface, kind of reading between the lines?
I talked about how it pulls up forward, my expectations of when this would be happening. So I'm still kind of, stunned. But the full lean in from the entire state political apparatus, governor, senators, representatives. And then if you go back a couple months, they did a talk where the Joby Manufacturing Ohio head that they had just hired maybe 6 months ago was there, Tom. And maybe that was like early rumblings that this was going to be coming soon. We just couldn't piece it together, but that they went to the Chamber of Commerce or local business community. I mean, it just shows you the deep roots that they're planting in Ohio. Ohio seems to be, they've got their A game in terms of going to CES and using Joby as the poster child for manufacturing and reindustrializing. When you look at the, regardless of your politics, the administration, is really keying in on that message. When you look at the Defense Department and all of the onshoring and the need to build a resilient and robust manufacturing capability, you listen to Palmer Luckey and Andrew, people like that are talking about how it's not how exquisite our technology is. It's how fast can we manufacture. And then you come back to Joby, and I know I'm kind of rambling into defense here, but the idea that you have all this square footage and you can in concept, right? I think the concept would be you're building S4s and then all of a sudden you need a ramp for the S4T variant, and it looks like from the outside, aside from the fact that it doesn't have windows, it looks like it's essentially the same plane. Maybe the avionics, maybe the sensors inside, maybe the payload is classified or can be used for lots of different things. Maybe it carries people, maybe it doesn't. It seems like it's all come together like from top to bottom, and the long lead time for all of this too, as a Joby investor, is exciting because it shows that, to your point about that golden ticket or that piece of paper, once you get type certification, it's that plus the ability to have a product that's available for people to purchase or to get on and use as a service. And so to me, this was massive news. It was a massive unlock. And now, it'll be fun to start tracking some of those early indicators like we talked about, maybe the simulator, maybe the autoclaves, maybe the hiring ramp, if they start adding a second shift to their hiring activity. It's going to be fun to track this and keep our eyes on this story. And it just throws one more big topic into the mix, along with type certification, TIA, FAA pilots getting on these planes. And then, the demo of that S4T, maybe we'll see a little bit more how it's different from the S4. So yeah, exciting. It was really great. This was huge for me.
Yeah. No, it's and the cool part too about the S4T. Now, Joby has luckily never talked about building attritable planes, in particular because I think Joby for the most part wants their planes to always take off on land.
Yeah.
That's what their specialty is, actually building that, and that take off vertically and to land.
It's a nice feature to have, but you don't want to publicize that as your go-to-market strategy, is to talk about how you can lose these planes.
Yeah, I think, for the most part, that would be my druthers, and certainly how I appreciate it as a investor. But the S4T doesn't need to go through the full certification process. Now, Joby has already put the platform, and that's why I always stress the S4T, or excuse me, the S4 is not a aircraft, and that's been proven. The S4T is a variant of that original platform, but that, for all intents and purposes, really that partnership with L3 Harris. L3 Harris is going to make that a very sophisticated, sensor set on board that aircraft that they'll be able to do whatever. And I think also too, what was really interesting to me, and this could be just because sometimes I'm a bit focused on the details with Joby, but Joby had the picture of the S4T flying, and they didn't even post it first per se. It was something with Secretary of War Hegseth was at some conference or something, and that was when it was announced, and then Jobin posted about it. But it's a picture of it flying. It's 100% flying. But then when you look at Joby's wrap up video of 2025, when they, they pull up the text for, Dubai, and then they show the video from Dubai, and then, this, that, and the other. But when they referenced that aircraft, they didn't show the video. They actually showed I think they either showed 544 Juliet X-ray or 545 Juliet X-ray. And I remember seeing that. It's like, well, that's weird because we know that thing flew. And so I think that the S4T has probably already started to, get deep into things on the military side, and they are not going to disclose everything. They haven't talked about the range, and smart on them. The asset becomes more valuable the less that people know about it. And at this point, as an investor, yeah, sure, you want to know everything that's going on in the company, but Joby's proven the S4 is solid. They've proven the defense partnership. They've been working with the military the longest out of all of their partners. That's who originally funded them. But yeah, I think the S4T has a lot more in store. And I think I said this sometime last year or not, but once you get Dayton be at a place where they're able to manufacture all of the composite parts, everything, that I almost think Marina might turn into, because that's also where they have the Joby Special Projects team, and that's they've recently they reiterated that will still be their R&D facility. I think that becomes more of the military plant of where things are going to be built. That could be completely wrong, just a gut feel, but I think that makes sense. But also, with the relationship of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the Air Force and everybody right there in Dayton, it could be there too, right? Who knows? But the S4T, they're going to build more than one of those this year. And I think that's something really to watch. But I do want to bring up something that you had reminded me of was, so first I'm going to show, let me pull this over here. Hopefully I can get this to sit. Perfect. So this was just a picture that I had posted of what the two facilities that Joby has. So obviously Dayton International Airport. This top bubble up here is the USPS building, and got to visit that myself, which is really nice to see. But it is a smaller footprint. And if you come down here, this is the new facility, the 730,000 square feet. So it's a 6-minute drive. And I think that's really, obviously that's crucial. But if you kind of let your eyes sit, that I'm going to show you another picture, and that picture is going to stop right here where I'm drawing with the cursor. And that is what you had referenced earlier. And this is a video that Arna and I did. Gosh, now this has been a couple of years ago. And in this, you can see that same map. And so this was that line that I was drawing on the previous picture here. So if you see these two, you'll notice that where I've mapped out here, and this is based off of the actual filing when the Dayton facility came online, of what would that look like. And each blue kind of shape here represents roughly 200,000 square feet. And that's how Joby had originally guided that they would have up to 2 million square feet. And so everything in the yellow is the green space that could have been used. The new 730-foot facility, obviously they're not building, it was already there, but that's not even in their footprint. So this doesn't even scratch the surface of what is still possible and what they're trying to build at Dayton. And I just call that out because, again, all that matters, certification has taken all 16, going on 17 years to get there. But then now, Joby is going to exist for, decades and decades and decades forward. Certification doesn't matter past that, right? Once it's certified, it's certified. Obviously, they'll make different variants of the S4 platform, and they've already alluded to that. But it's all about manufacturing. And so just the size of what Joby is going to have to undertake, nobody has tried to build this much aircraft outside of, during world wars. So, it is important that they're going to have space, because what they're doing is an incredibly large endeavor. But it's extremely important for me, and something that I think is a leading indicator is that everything that they're doing, you don't see them making desperate moves or, partnerships. Everything is very thoughtful. They are really playing 3D chess. And so anyway, just a little nugget, I think, that is important for people to recognize is what's happening in Dayton is, it's going to be even bigger and more substantial than I think what they've already said that it would be to this point. And obviously that's going to take some time to build out, but yeah, thank you for pulling this out of the memory banks.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the footprint for Joby now is expanded. Like sidebar, there's an interesting discussion on LinkedIn about like square foot to plane ratios, and I think it didn't resonate with me, but it made me think about the footprint. And so aside from just the square footage in Dayton, you've got the Costa Rica presence, right, the office. And I think that's that avionics business, which was an interesting, really clever move to acquire that company because they help with certification. So you own a company that can help you with certification, I believe. And then they have the Stuttgart-based H2 Fly or the precision tooling team, I think, in Germany. I think they have two different teams.
One of the companies that they acquired.
Yeah. So and both of those are growing. Like H2 Fly has posted that they're growing. They have basically hired HR people to manage the German operation, and looks like they're adding staff there to produce high quality parts for maybe their R&D efforts when they're iterating and they're trying to do things. I know they can 3D print and do stuff in Marina as well. And then you have Marina, which is expanded. And then you have Richmond, California, where I believe the X-Wing operation initially was based, and some of their hiring still lists Richmond. So it'd be interesting to see if they start to consolidate, or if all of those, that footprint is the ideal footprint. You have, a place where you can do autonomous flying and maybe some military work. You've got a place where you can still get high quality German precision engineering tooling. And at the same time, you're building out the capacity or capability to do all of that, maybe under one roof at some point. So I feel like this really unlocks like the full potential of what they're doing. It signals that they're ready. I mean, that's their slogan for 2026. We're ready. And the debates on the sidelines of like, when do you do this and how much CapEx and things like that, I think, given how thoughtful they've been with their strategy and execution, to me, this all is a very confident signal that they are ready.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the photo. It's one of my favorite photos. It's the S4. It's early morning dawn, but it almost looks black. The aircraft does, and it just looks, man, it looks like an aggressive aircraft. And in that photo, it says 2026. We're ready. And but I'm going to put up just here on the chat that this is a couple notes. First from Mac. And this is something that, he has talked about. Obviously, he was a part of the team that originally permitted the tent and some of the facilities for Joby years ago. But something that, and hopefully this will, let's see if this will let me show.
Yeah, there you go. You pulled it up. Awesome.
Yeah. So Mac, Mr. Mac on X, you guys should definitely check out some of his stuff. But said, yes, they still have the first right of refusal on all 81 acres of the Marina Airport if they want to expand further. So again, you see that not only are they're putting their footprint in an important place, but they're putting it right next to, an airport that they, Joby is going to control Marina at some point. That I think is probably destined to happen. And when you see something like, they negotiated in to have a first right of refusal, that's an incredibly helpful thing to know. So
great point, Mac.
Yeah, great highlight from Mac. And let's see. Well, it's kind of showing up as 2, so I'm going to just speak to it, Phil. But this is saying that L3 Harris is strongly committed to the Department of War's vision for a faster, more agile defense industrial base while remaining laser focused on driving value for our shareholders and customers. That's from Chairman and CEO Christopher Kubasik. And this transaction further aligns the L3 portfolio with the Department of War core mission priorities. So I'm presuming that, you know, as we see what L3 Harris is doing, there's been some other things about defense contractors and primes and yada, yada, that they are going to have to kind of diversify a bit. And I think this will be a very unique thing. And what I think is great is Joby, you know, again, keeps everything vertically integrated. L3 Harris is going to be to install the sensor suites, et cetera, onto the aircraft, but they're not core to redefining how the thing flies, et cetera. And, you know, I think that's really important because it really pulls through Joby's vertical integration, and that allows an incredible amount of flexibility and dynamic flexibility for them to both test, design, build, manufacture. You know, the pilots can come back and say, hey, something was this, or engineers can say something was that. They can design it, print it, you know, additive printing or 3D printing. There's still some unknowns or undefined things from FAA on what will be and not allowed to be used, at least at the start, in terms of additive manufacturing. But what's exciting is that Joby has entire buildings at Marina that are dedicated to that, and they won't let anybody in. We've never seen videos of them. And so that's really something that I think, again, you know, Joby, they only give you a little bit, but there's a lot more working underneath the hood. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting, like the optionality now to you know, you design a platform, and then you move it to Dayton and you scale, or to Ohio, and you scale it in Dayton, and then that frees up your manufacturing lines that you're using in Marina. Maybe not in the first couple of years, because you probably want to keep those lines going and pump out as many of the S4s as you possibly can to serve all of the markets that they've made commitments to, or to expand in markets. And that's a whole nother topic, right? Like, man, the UAE, it's like you get word of the 4 vertiports that are being built or, you know, close to completion. And then you have, you know, the expanded vertiport regime, you know, that's in the neighboring Emirates or islands. So they're going to want to obviously serve all of those, but you could see maybe a path to, you've got Marina as your, you know, your home base, where you've got that relationship with the airport, so you can fly, you know, these test vehicles in an environment. You have pilots and people who work there who are, you know, who've relocated, and it's close to the Bay Area. You've got your battery team that can be innovating on the peninsula, and then you can fly over, you know, the mountain to get to Marina and or Hollister, as Mac was saying too. It sounds like, you know, there's some potential lease activity there. Maybe that's for the IPP, but you could see, you know, kind of things starting to settle, and they kind of, it's like an Apple model where it's designed in Cupertino, and then it's the precision manufacturing, high quality manufacturing is done somewhere else, and that Marina campus can be where that becomes their R&D facility amongst other facilities they have. So that's probably going to be great for them to have the option to use those lines however they see fit, and to attack any opportunities that they either have planned and we haven't heard about, but, you know, if there's a new variant or a block upgrade or things like that, all of that thinking and iteration and vertical integration can happen in California. And then it's just it's a flip of a switch to then turn it on and start printing new S4s, out of the big factory. And who knows, maybe they'll, to that question earlier about, like, are the garage doors big enough to get the planes out? Maybe they pull a Tesla like they did with the Cyber truck, and, you know, that tunnel they built from the Texas factory, and it kind of births these Cyber trucks. Maybe they pop a hole in the top of the building, and each S4 flies out like out of the top. That's not happening, but hey, why not? Maybe there'll be some whimsy involved in their manufacturing process the way Tesla does it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, I'll put up here from Mac on the stream, but that Joby is signing a lease for space in Hollister, and that's going to be for airport to airport, and then also furthering their flight testing for TIA in particular. And there was a link that I can throw up, or an article. I will drop this into the chat here that talks about that there are some FAA approvals that are required. Joby was trying to get hangar space, but then there wasn't enough. So I think it's going to be varied to see what actually comes out of that. But I'll see if that okay, cool, that worked to pop up on YouTube as well. But yeah, no, and I think something that I meant to say this prior, as we talk about, definitely not to get ahead of certification, but Joby has done everything to be, in an incredible position for certification, both in the States, UAE, and around the world, including Japan and South Korea. But the thing to me about the manufacturing that's so important is, like, Joby could have put out this article that says, hey, we're doubling manufacturing, and like, great. But can we, the question would be, all right, well, does that match reality? Like, just because you have a building, you could build a brand new building, right? You could build a brand new, manufacturing plant, but what's happening inside, and I think what's so telling for me, it was even though I started looking at Joby in 2019, but even in 2022, before I went to the facility in 2022, and seeing is believing, right? And especially something that's so such a nascent technology, a nascent sector. You really don't know until your own eyeballs see it. And walking into that facility and, walking into the airlock, and as soon as you walk in, in front of you, there's a 3D printing fiber placement carbon fiber robot. To the right, there's another robot, and that's the one that you've seen in videos that's doing the long wing spar. It's like, it's a 40-foot wing. But this is very sophisticated equipment. You could eat off of the floor in that facility. Everything is built extremely specifically modular. You can see the Toyota layers of things built in and lean manufacturing, but also the Toyota teams on site. But what I think is really important is that for years, not just since 2022, when that was the first public tour that had ever gone through that facility, and we weren't allowed to film anything. Since they have shown some of the things, and even like on Mac's tour, he was allowed to post some photos of some of those areas. Some were blocked off, but the infamous blue tent, which was probably ended up being the S4T, because it was right around that time. Who knows? But I think, seeing that for years now, we have seen multiple videos, long videos, not quick cuts that, make it so that you could maybe, pull the wool over somebody's eyes watching it. Some very specific equipment that they show. Some of their processes, they don't show them all, thankfully, because, obviously this is, things that people would love to know how to do that Joby has done on their own. And people really would love to know what Joby's doing. But, separate from that, to see the visibility of manufacturing is extremely important to me. As soon as the USPS building was open, they're already showing videos of Didier walking through. Then you see videos of, guys actually making the propellers and, the proprietary titanium wing sleeve or propeller blade sleeves and things that specific technology that they're willing to show, I think has always been such a telling thing for me, because if you couldn't see inside of the factory of, a company, man, that's something that I think would probably change my mind. But having that level of visibility and transparency from the executives is quite telling. So
I think it's really interesting to, like, when you wind the clock back and you look at how many flight miles Joby's put up on the board, 50,000 now. And then you look at the number of planes they've produced, from models all the way to this, what looks to be now the conforming plane that they turned the electronics on, but we haven't seen or heard about it flying or being handed off yet. I I think, and then you tie back to that Tesla manufacturing hell, when Tesla went from, some really great, model cars that were great, to actually building the Model 3 and the Model Y. And if you look at the workforce, there are a lot of ex-Tesla people at senior levels, and throughout battery technology and production and manufacturing. And I think the hope is that the lessons learned from Tesla, going from hotshot technology play, trying to disrupt the automotive industry, and kind of thinking through how to build a car as efficiently as possible, and from first principles for an EV, not a traditional gas car. It's a lot harder than it looked, right? Even for Tesla, with the amazing talent that they had. And if Joby can truly sort of learn from that, and it seems like there's been multiple interviews with executives and people from Joby who have that Tesla scar tissue, to hear them talk about those lessons learned. I hope, and I trust that they've put that in, and then mix in that Tesla didn't have Toyota working shoulder to shoulder, as Joe Ben says, right, with them through that production hell, as they called it. And so, just the manufacturing piece is like the visible part of it. The parts that you were talking about, that you got to do the tour, and most people don't, we saw the Monroe video, is the other, it's what's underneath the visible part of the iceberg, right? Is just the reps that they've had. And I'm talking about, like, the unglamorous things, like, how do you hire people? How do you retain them? How do you train them? What kinds of people are really suited to do this carbon fiber laying out, the Torre composite technology, and then how do you do that quickly? It seems like the signal to build comes after you've figured out the hardest parts of it, and then you're ready to actually expand and have more square footage to do what you've already, I'm not going to say perfected, but what you already know how to do. And I think the lead time for that, to me, is almost as significant as the lead time to get type certification and to have a plane that you can do. Just, there's so many parts to all of this. Every time we have these conversations, the reason why we go down all these rabbit holes is it's super complicated. It's like the toughest thing to do is to certify a plane and fly it, and then actually to build it, at scale. So I see really good signs from this manufacturing announcement, because I feel like I've got a grasp of everything that's underneath it to get you to that point. So it's pretty exciting. It pulls up things for me in terms of when they can have more planes, and the confidence that they have that their manufacturing process has been, thought through and is fully baked, versus, hey, we can just build one or two really easy test vehicles, versus, hey, we're manufacturing the actual thing. We've got the confidence to do it. We've built multiple versions of the plane. We can even do the variant for the military, et cetera, et cetera. It was a great announcement.
Yeah, no, I think, it's why, and something we've talked about online of, even how do we set up these conversation, right? Is Joby has done so much, and everything is all interconnected. Kind of the joke of, they really have thought of everything, where one thing ties to the next thing. And I think hopefully 2026, from the investor side, but just for the company, what a crucial year. And I think, pressure is a privilege type of situation for Joby. They have earned the privilege to be leading the charge in eVTOL. The S4 is a unique aircraft. You won't find another that can do what it does. But that, whether it's the DoD piece or the Toyota piece or the Uber piece or the Delta piece or CAE or working with regulators around the world, there is such a strong foundation that has already been built well before, eVTOL was even a buzzword, coming out of the SPAC craze and everything, where Joby and others went public. This is a real deal aerospace giant that is just, I don't know, maybe in the teenage years and about to kind of grow up really quick. And that's what I think is so exciting as we look into trying to, cover the the company, but also, tie in some of these threads that you have to kind of been following for a long period of time to know what it is. If you look up things on, ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini, they're just regurgitating a lot of things that articles have printed that may or may not be accurate. It's just PR that has been put out, in this space. And what I think is important with Joby is you can tangibly, obviously given the opportunity, and that's like hopefully to share a bit, but the progress that they're making isn't just PR and other means of marketing. They are really making this happen, and that's why I think from the investor side of this story, why it is so incredible how big and deep the moat that they have built is, and people still have no idea. And that's something that I, for the next year or two is I think a good adjective would be asymmetric.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting too, like to see how, from a workforce standpoint, they've talked about how fun it is to, tying some of the topics we talked about, how fun it is to fly the plane, how, the simulator is really easy. The training program, if you're flight certified as a pilot, you can be a Joby pilot in a 6-week course, right? So I think there's going to be an interesting unlock. And I don't have a long history in aviation. I've just learned as I've followed Joby. But it would seem to me that if you're in manufacturing, like I've done the tour of the Boeing plant. If anyone has ever gone up to Seattle, outside of Seattle, you can go do the tour and you can see how the Dreamliners are built. And it's pretty cool to see the process where like a plane comes in, just it's like a Lego set, it's like there's a couple of things that are stuck together. And then as the plane slowly moves through the factory, which is I think the largest, one of the largest factories in the world, at the end of a month, I think a Dreamliner rolls off the line. It's like white, and they paint it with the colors of whoever the customer is. That's like a month-long process. And when you kind of go fast forward into the future, the S4s are going to come off the line a lot faster. And so I have to think, like, if you're in Ohio and you're in the aviation industry, or or in the automotive industry, and then you get a job at Joby, it's gonna be so fun to see the fruits of your labor, kind of coming out, pumping out of the factory, so much faster. And then you take that same concept, and if you're a pilot, and you can, in 6 weeks, you can be flying this plane, and you can, you're gonna have these happy customers doing, like maybe tourist flights in New York, or they're going to be going to the airports, and all of that stuff. There's going to be like a fun factor, right? Like that you can't discount when you're thinking about how they're going to attract really talented people who want to do something new. So I think the move to Ohio was fantastic for that. Obviously, that wasn't their idea. Anduril is doing the same thing. Archer has a Georgia factory. You can't build everything in California, even Anduril, right? Like you can't do everything in Long Beach. It's just, and Joe Ben talked about how, being able to tap into this amazing manufacturing history with the Wright brothers in Ohio. And then you talk about what people would be building, building into a whole new class of aircraft that we haven't seen in 70 years. And then the fact that these things are going to be, not like cars, not millions, but there's going to be hundreds, right? Or maybe someday thousands, tens of hundreds, to start. So I think it'd be really fulfilling, if you're in that space to work for Joby or work in the industry. And so I think they're breaking ground on all these fronts. It seems like they're not going to have as challenging of a time to find the tech talent that they need, or to constantly be competing with other people to keep their workforce. And so hopefully that'll help them in the long run too. It's good to have good, talented people. From a CEO standpoint, Joe Ben gets it, right? He talked about affordability. I think everyone has that on their minds right now. Everyone's like, hey, this economy has been really good for a lot of people, but there's a lot more people who haven't felt the benefits of it. And then on top of that, to be part of something that's new and exciting, man, I think that, when they do a job fair, I think they're going to have a ton of people who are looking at what they're doing, and they're like, do I want to still continue to pump out cars, or airplanes, just kind of grind through, or do I want to be part of something game changing? And so, it's going to be exciting to see what kind of talent they're able to recruit in Ohio. And from the early news that we're seeing out of the propeller production, it seems they're so happy with the quality of individuals that are coming to Joby, and more importantly, the work that they're doing is top notch, and that it has to be at that level, right? Like for aviation safety. So feel really good about that. These were all seeds that were planted a long time ago, and to see them starting to, flower and bloom. Maybe that's too soon to say that, but we're getting closer.
Yeah, no, I think no, that's really a crucial point to all this, right? Is certification is an expensive piece of paper, manufacturing is everything, but you need people to do it. And in particular for these aircraft, part of it will be automated through carbon fiber replacement robots, et cetera. But there's still going to be a lot of hand layup and things that are required. So I think leaning into what you just said about the talent. The great part too, to me, is it's not just that Joby's all in on Dayton. Dayton's all in on Joby. I've seen just as many local news, clips and interest about Dayton as I've seen in Marina. And I think a lot of that is also when you look at these announcements, it wasn't just Joby, making the announcement. You also saw there were senators, governors, everybody was making their piece about it. And Jobs Ohio, whether that was at the Paris Air Show, whether it's just at CES, Jobs Ohio is actually doing a lot of the promotion for Joby. And so, just with their network and what they're trying to build, obviously Jobs Ohio is essentially a marketing firm for Ohio and Ohio manufacturing, not just aerospace, that they have made a coordinated effort, and they have made an investment right into Joby, because they wouldn't be doing all that production if they didn't think that they were actually going to maybe get to the 2,000 jobs, roughly, that are going to be in that space. And one, little anecdotal thing that I, well, really two things, but the first was when I was at Salinas at the air show, which is incredible. Joby is the only eVTOL flying there. They flew from Marina Airport over to Salinas, performed some things that we hadn't seen even, at least from the publicized videos, even in Osaka, but those flights were right around the same time in October of 2025. But when I was there were young Joby engineers that would, come up and, talking to them, and I'm thanking them for what they're doing. And they are just so fired up about what they're doing and the mission. And you can tell that is the excitement that is driving it. It's not they're going, yes, it's a cool company, and the culture of Joby is, if you ask across the board, is definitely a strong suit. But that these are young, very smart individuals who could go apply for Tesla, apply for Apple, Google, Meta, SpaceX, so on, Anduril, Palantir, so on and so forth. But that they are making that choice to stay and join with Joby. And I look back at and kind of tie it to my second thing here that I think could potentially be a big boon for Joby is, you kind of look at the John Wagner story, right? John Wagner was actually there through all the hard years at Tesla. And after he left, things, eased up a little bit. They had Model 3 production hell, but, he really laid the foundation, as the lead architect on the Model S powertrain. And when you see what John Wagner did was think about what he walked away from at Tesla to, and from all signs and everything that I've heard from John, I've had a chance to meet him. I had the walkthrough in October 2022, but he is just a genuine smart guy. He salt of the earth, would not, he's not motivated by money. He's really in the mission. And he talked about at the production launch, if you go back and watch that video, he talks about thanking the team that helps clean up after, or the team that's cooking for them. That's the type of individual. But so, he obviously, hopefully was, rewarded for his time at Tesla, and he was, but that it moved past that and back to working with Jobin. Obviously they have a huge history together, but being a part of this thing that seemed impossible, right? This other moonshot. And I think what you might see is more and more people, even in the industry, have no idea what Joby is, or eVTOL. They still think it's Jetsons or something that's like years away. But, I think you'll probably start to see a lot of really talented people who have made their money or secured their future or their family's future at all these other large, companies and startups that, sure, there's always a financial aspect to all of this, right? That's the beauty of our system here in the States, but that, if you've already made your money or you were a young engineer at NVIDIA or something like that, and that NVIDIA is now partnered with Joby, do you come over to Joby and work on autonomy with the X-Wing team? I'd say, heck yeah, right? If you made your money, you still have opportunity for upside, but you could be a part of this thing that's obviously NVIDIA's incredible in leading, the AI revolution, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that there's, some other dynamics that'll play out over time, and they, won't always be pen to paper. But I think you'll start to see that. And I know, you found quite a bit on LinkedIn about Joby's hiring, and you just see the quality. There's a ton of people who have come from Apple and Tesla specifically. And I think, that tells you something. That's the tip of the spear from engineering, at least, certainly Tesla. And, that's what I think is probably the most exciting, because those people too, if you've made your money and, you've had your time in California, and maybe you do want to, move back somewhere else or somewhere where you can buy, actually afford a big house, right? Or live in a community, some of those things that Jobin spoke about. Obviously that is a huge part of his upbringing, community. He grew up in an off-grid community, to see what he's doing with the culture. And especially, Joby's, I think now they're over 2,000 employees, or right around that threshold. That's really hard to keep culture, right? It's hard to keep culture if you scale, a small startup, much or less something that, Joby gets thrown into startup pile. But as you mentioned, all the many facilities that they have globally, these aren't just random partnerships. This is real deal teams doing real deal manufacturing, both software and hardware. So anyway, I think a lot of interesting parts of the people of Joby's story that is still to unfold. For the most part, now we've seen mostly from the executives, but even some of the other engineers. But I think that's really important for me to see for the future.
Phil Zale has a comment that kind of touches on the competition. I don't know if you want to bring that up, or but it made me think about how there's a compounding effect too with the people. So, like it starts with the culture, then it moves to, the manufacturing. But we talked about the sim and the pilot certification. Bonnie's talked about, just the quality of life for pilots that can, have a shift, like a 9 to 5 shift as a Joby pilot. I'm just making, I don't know what the exact rules will be for how often you can fly. I think there's a certain number of hours.
Roughly.
Yeah, but it seems like, if it starts with when the plane lifts off the vertiport and lands, that's 10 minutes of flying. I'm guessing they won't be constrained, but just in concept. And again, I'm not a pilot, but I'm imagining if you've been an airline pilot, and then it kind of becomes, I'm working for Delta, United, Southwest, and it's kind of a grind. People get on planes these days, and you've seen the YouTube videos and the TikToks of people going nuts, and all the stuff that pilots have to deal with. And then the airline industry is just ruthlessly low margin, and you hear about union strikes, and it just seems like it'd be a grind, right? And then if you could just go work for Joby and take people, 4 passengers, on these easy to fly routes with these big windows and quiet airplane, transformative technology. This is the future, lift off vertically and get to a destination. That would be an awesome job, it would seem, right? Like it would be you'd have joy, in your day, introducing people to flying, at low altitude. So, you've got that. Then you've got the manufacturing piece of people wanting to build something new, made in America. You just go across the board. So it starts with the top, the culture, the feeding people, good food, like you were pointing out when you went on that site visit, and they had a chef, and that's like a Silicon Valley thing, introducing those things, making it a family, and then having that integration between the pilots and then the blade. Here we go, right? Like it just starts, you start pulling all these threads, right? And then the the quality of people. There are a lot of former military people that they've recruited for, not just pilots, people who are working in government affairs, people who are working on probably stuff that we don't know about. It seems like it's a talent magnet. And when you have a talent magnet, it makes things so much easier. People stay longer. You don't have to transition knowledge. This is very specialized knowledge. You attract more people. They talk to more people. So in an environment where you might be constrained, or down the future where you've got you need hundreds of pilots, it certainly helps to the point that Phil was raising about the competition, and is everyone prepared to do the same thing? It's very difficult. It's very difficult to do. And you got to have a founder who understands engineering and understands people and cares about the people. And it's not to say that this isn't a hardworking organization. I mean, we've seen the flight testing on Saturdays and Sundays, and we've seen anecdotal evidence about how mission driven people are. Obviously, we've seen the videos where, the first inhabited piloted flight brought tears to the team's eyes. And if you haven't seen that video, wow, like that's a pretty emotional video. So it's a lot easier when you're doing something cool and you're one of the leaders and you've thought through all the steps to actually be able to execute, and you're doing what you're saying you're doing. It's a lot easier to make that jump if you feel like, hey, I'm going to take a chance on this high-tech startup, in aviation. And so I think Joby has a real advantage there.
Yeah, and it's, you make a good point, kind of the compounding effect. And as we said, you talk about one topic with Joby and it leads to, another, and the different threads. But what I think, has started to really show, and I think, in the end, the proof will be in the pudding, as they say, but Joby has built things that money can't buy. Like literally, if you had billions and billions of dollars, you couldn't buy what Joby has built. Because it's relationship driven just as much as it is infrastructure, et cetera. Some of these other components of things that they've laid out. And, for me, when I think about that, that's, when you start to talk about what I've talked about before is like the different moats and things that Joby has. Obviously, VTOL is one of them as of now. But, even further, the layers and layers and layers of foundational work that has been done, it is, remarkable. To see where Joby has achieved in this much time. I'm trying to find actually on your here real quick in the background is just to reference something that you had alluded to about the military connections with Joby, and I'm trying to look through my the visual timeline here to find when it was. But Joby has a gentleman who joined from Lockheed who used to work in Skunk Works. And this is not just somebody who was working at a base and that's what they were involved in. I think why I cannot find this, but the level of talent that they're bringing in is truly remarkable. And that's something, the military piece, obviously without it, Joby wouldn't have got this far. They've been a huge key to their puzzle of funding them, but also just allowing them to have these use cases. Obviously, they're using some of the facilities that the government uses for some of the testing of aircraft that haven't even ever officially, been talked about by the company. So as the people are going to continue to join and be a huge part of the Joby story. But I think the connection to Department of War now, but not just from the defense part of those applications, right? It's those would be the pilots that are serving in the commercial capacity, at least certainly to start. So I think I'm very excited about that.
I think that's another, not to beat that iceberg analogy, but when you there's the part you see above the water, that's the photos at the White House or at the various Senate hearings. That's the trade show pictures and things like that. But what's really underneath that is the people having the Skunk Works person. It's not like having a military board with 10 generals that if you look closely, those generals move around, or those people kind of take board positions. But we're talking like people who used to, were servicing the F-35 or flying the F-35, who are now working at Joby, or people who worked at an air base, or, for different branches of the service, who are now, taking their GI Bill, getting a advanced degree in aeronautics, and then have real mission experience with the government. Putting all that together, that's a lot harder than taking a photo in front of the White House, or, being at a press conference where the FAA wants to have the entire industry there. I think the substance behind Joby's effort has been slow and methodical to build. And, if we're talking about modes or competition, I feel really good about where Joby is with its core competencies and experience and workforce and their exposure, because I think the other stuff Joby's been very quiet about. They don't really trumpet. You don't see a lot of photos with Joe Ben and senior leadership. And I don't know, I don't get the sense that that's a disadvantage. I think being able to talk the talk when regulators come and visit your plant and see that you're actually producing, see the quality of the people, when you're working with the Department of War, and you have you have that culture already in your that services culture already in your workforce. I think it makes it easier, or maybe not easier, but it makes people more comfortable working with Joby as an OEM, as a manufacturer, as a partner. And I think those are things you can't really translate to the balance sheet. You can't translate to the production timeline. It just seems like when regulators from Dubai or the UAE come, or Canada, we've seen a lot of those site visits by the UK, Canada, etc., Australia, New Zealand. Losing track of all of them. Yeah, I think it's the totality of what they see of the workforce. There's people who've got military experience. There's people who have got high level manufacturing experience. There's people from Tesla. There's people from Stanford. There's people from Ohio State, some of these top schools. So, I think there's a lot more underneath the iceberg that we see that's there in Joby, and that gives me confidence too, on top of manufacturing and on top of some of these milestones that they've achieved now with the simulator.
Yeah, no, I think, and I just pulled up the picture here of Brian Sandberg. So he was in the Navy for 24 years as a pilot. He's a flight test lead at Joby, but outside of the over 2 decades in the Navy, he did 6 years at Lockheed in Skunk Works as a test pilot and manager. So there's a couple interviews where he speaks on YouTube, but very obviously knowledgeable individual. And just to highlight, and this article's a couple of years back when he joined, and he's still at the company, obviously, but he's also the president of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. And so when you talk about a group of people who would probably love to get into the S4, who are certainly probably flying the S4 and Microsoft Flight Simulator, is probably going to be some of Brian's old colleagues.
Not to nitpick, but Brian, full disclosure, Brian did move on from Joby just recently. So
just recently, okay.
Yeah. But there you go, right? Like when you see people leave Joby, it's very interesting to see in LinkedIn. There's a lot of like former colleagues who are wishing their former colleagues well. They always talk pretty well about their experience. There's obviously lawsuits, and things like that happen with employee relations, but those.
And that's at any company.
That's at any company. But Brian went on to do something, to join a new company, and the talent that's coming in, just right behind him, is equally capable, and it's great to see. And they've had a lot of new additions as well. So you probably, when you get a little free time, you can update the visual timeline with some new faces too. But it doesn't take anything away from what Brian contributed as a longtime Joby employee. and
Yeah,
he,
I
he's
would just
probably,
say, yeah, I would just say something that's unique there, and obviously, we don't know. There's all speculation, but what I think, is it right, and just in our own personal life, people, work at a job and then you move on, but his specialty, whether that was, in the Navy, then at Lockheed, and then at Joby, was to the experimental test pilot side of things. And my gut would be, if you were so heavily involved in that and that you've moved on right as the company seems to have kind of moved past that phase of things. Just a little interesting tidbit, but obviously I'm super appreciative of all of his work, because he was there through a crucial part of the flight test development of the S4 platform to put it here knocking on the doorstep of flight authorization or type certification. Here hopefully in the next 12-18 months.
yeah, it's I mean, it's like, it's interesting, right? Like you want to have bench strength, and you also want to be able to recruit new talent, and you need more people like Brian. And you see, as an industry, it'll be interesting to track, right? Like Vertical just had they lost someone that went to Archer, right? That was one of their lead engineers, and so there's going to be a lot of that happening. And as the whole talent pool for eVTOLs grows, there'll be opportunities for people to move around. But I think what I like, and I'm seeing at Joby, is they have, it's like that DDA talked about, the machine that builds the machine. Like when you have a core group and you build and establish a culture, a testing culture, an engineering culture, manufacturing culture, service culture, blade, etc., you you have something that people want to join. And then obviously people leave, from time to time. So I think that's the key core um, uh, unlock for Joby, is they've built a culture that permeates across all of their divisions. It's very similar. You don't have different divisions with different cultures. There's just sort of this top-down culture from Bonnie, from DDA, from Joben, and then it attracts people to come and want to be a part of it. And it's cool to see them able to take the show out on the road now. You talked about the flying at the air shows, having the staff there, the families there. They were in multiple contents of flying, and so there's a lot of people getting excited about this company, whether they want to invest, whether they want to ride one of these things, whether they want to join the company. And that's a huge advantage. It's a massive advantage. And I think for a while, all of us following Joby were hoping that they would tell their story more articulately, more, it's such an engaging story. And this past year, their marketing team has been able to put pictures and words and sounds to it. And one last thing to say, it's really interesting to see that Joby lets the people do the talking. You don't see Joe Ben on every single press release. You don't see Joe, it seems like a confident culture where leaders can delegate, and the teams that are doing the stuff are the ones getting the recognition. Whether it was the flight test videos, we didn't see Bonnie, barely saw DDA. It was just that flight test team, right? And so that I think tells you a lot. Like you can glean a lot of information from that. So Phil, you were asking about the competition and the hoops that everyone has to jump through. These are the kinds of hoops on top of the technical hoops, on top of the funding hoops, on top of the marketing hoops. And I think if you've got your people in place and you've got a culture that attracts and retains them, that's like most of the battle, right? The marketing piece is easy. All these other pieces can follow a lot easier than actually building a culture where you're not losing people and constantly trying to replace them and get them excited and hold them long enough because you're making enough progress. If you're not making enough progress, people are going to leave, right? If people don't believe in the culture, if there's funky stuff happening, it's a lot harder to retain those people and make a compelling reason for why they should join your company. I think Joby is in a really strong position right now across all of these things we've talked about.
Yeah, no, I just want to highlight here, because this was something that was actually said. I believe Buzzer Wilson said this, but I'm going to put this up from that Phil had put. just so it's on there, but that any pilots who have flown F-35B could step right into the S4. And obviously Buddy Denham was crucial as one of the lead engineers to coming up with the unified flight controls for the F-35 program for the US Navy. And then also obviously bringing that to the Joby S4 aircraft. So really cool little highlight there, but Phil, thanks for bringing that up. But yeah, just to kind of wrap here, you know, as I look at the future, you know, as I look to 2026, everything that has happened before this period of time, again, you know, Joby has built something that, you know, objectively, they're doing everything right. The hard things that you can measure: how many miles have you flown, how many pilots are, you know, trained on the aircraft, how much manufacturing capacity do you have, et cetera, vertiports, partnerships that are actually meaningful. But it's also the subjective things that you can't see, right? The culture that we spoke to, the understanding that Jobin has about, hey, I don't need to be the face of this company. The name of the company is already, you know, a play off of his name. That he lets the executives, you know, speak to things. Also the engineers. I mean, you very rarely do you find engineers being put, you know, in very prominent roles, especially speaking roles. Well, in the Monroe video, you know, Jobin is also an engineer, right? Jobin helped to design all, you know, the foundation of this entire company. Jobin was the one who walked through with Monroe, and he's the one who could speak to every single part and the different technical components of it. You saw John Wagner speaking to Monroe at the production launch. You had Jobin, Didier, and then John Wagner get up and speak. You know, that does not typically happen. The engineers kind of stay off of the back. And, you know, I think it does speak to both the understanding that the team has of what they've built, the technology. I mean, I don't just want a figurehead. I want somebody who actually is in the weeds. That's why everybody loves Elon, right? Sleeping on the factory floor is good or bad, or that might be for his own health and everything else. You know, people can respect that. And I think seeing the executives and how they speak, you know, they're always grateful for everybody around them, and nobody's trying to steal the spotlight. And that's something that as we go into 2026, those intangibles, you know, most people are looking at Joby and still trying to, you know, figure out some financial model, or people have no idea what's about to happen, because this, you know, the objective part sure is impressive. I mean, they're doing something, as you mentioned, it's been 80 years since we got a new classification of aircraft from the FAA. But how do you bring in the talent to actually build that many aircraft, right? If you're going to get to tens or hundreds or 500 aircraft in a year, that's you know, you're talking about tens of thousands of employees to be able to do that, regardless of how much automation that you use. And I think, you know, those are the things that I'm really excited about in 2026. I think 2025, Joby finally, you know, had that marketing push, and that the you know, marketing team at Joby has been doing a lot of community work and things like that was behind the scenes that people didn't realize, but it was also crucial to getting the regulators on board, et cetera, that the team has already done. And when you see what they've done up into 2025 to really start to make that presence felt around the sector, you know, you saw way more CNBC and those type of Bloomberg and Yahoo Finance, StockTwits, et cetera. You saw a lot more of that last year than you've ever seen in the history of the company. And I think 2026 is where we really start to see some of the threads get pulled together by the entire team. So yeah, with that, I will give you the last words, and we will wrap our first live stream. I don't think we thought we'd go almost 2 hours with it, but really good to just, you know, kind of get some of these thoughts out there and give another you know, channel and medium for people to hear and learn about Joby. Obviously, it's not about either of us or anyone in particular at the company. It's just about this incredible story and opportunity that we have, both as observers but as investors of this, you know, transformational technology and company. So with that, I'll kick it to you.
I was just going to say, like, you know, you made me think about like transparency. And I think if you're learning about this industry, what I like about Joby is it's very transparent to see who's behind it. So you've got Jobin, founder, engineer, you can make a movie about his life, right? Like I think someone in the community made a game cards for some of the Joby people. Like there's like, it's kind of fan fiction. I don't know what it is, but it's awesome. Right. And the the leadership team has sort of embraced that. I think some of that art that was created, but the point is that you kind of know what you're getting, right? You know, Rodrigo, he's been on the calls, he's a presence. Joe Ben's a presence. Eric Allison's been on YouTube and X, and you've seen videos with him, and you can kind of understand as the chief product officer, like what's going through his brain and how does it connect to Joe Ben's vision. Not to mention that these people have all been together as a tight cohort. Then you've got Greg as the policy officer, deep roots into Ohio. You know, he's been at the air shows, working on policy. Then you've got DDA talking about engineering in depth. You could go and you could find all the videos on DDA, and you could see how similar the vertical integration approach is to Tesla. And you could almost peer beyond the horizon to like future versions of the S4 block upgrades, variants, new planes. You know, we haven't even touched that, and that'd be exciting at some point. They haven't, showed too much about what they're thinking there. There's been, spy camera footage of vehicle, new form factors, hydrogen, things like that. Then you got Bonnie Simi, her whole story, another movie, right? Olympic athlete, pilot, 3 decades, flying big planes. The story of how she bumped into Joe Ben. I mean, like, you kind of have all that. It's all there for you if you want to understand it. I don't know that I've seen similar transparency or visibility into who is running the ship beyond Joe Ben, for other OEMs. And maybe it's because they're, more, they're at different stages, and Joby's at a more advanced stage. But I think, it's transparent. And then you look at the board of directors, you actually, you hear Paul Sciarra on the earnings calls. He's deep into the defense partnership. He deeply understands the business. He's got a lot of stock, so he should. But you can see, who's behind this. And it's fantastic. Michael Thompson, there was that video where it kind of went viral, where he was talking about the Wright brothers and the 250th anniversary of the United States and the White House and all these exciting things that may or may not happen. But as an investor and as a follower, it's easy to know what you're getting, who's behind it, who's pulling the strings, and the story has been pretty consistent. Granted, it's a whole new thing. Maybe the timelines shift a little bit here and there, and there's things that are outside of Joby's control, or in this new industry, everyone's control, right? With the SFAR, the vertiport guidelines that are coming out, things are moving at a pace that in some respects they can control, and other respects they can't control. But I really love the transparency behind the company. It's easy to spend a few hours or minutes to learn what, who's behind this. And I don't see it as easy to understand who's behind some of the other companies. And I'll admit, I haven't done as much research with some of the new entrants like Vertical Beta. You can see Kyle Clark behind that vision, driving it really. And then other people. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's great that they're so transparent and that they're empowering their team to express, their knowledge and their progress directly, to interviewers and conferences and things like that. And I hope we'll continue to see that, and there'll be more opportunities to learn what's going on inside a marina, what's going on inside of Dayton, and not having to like scan the internet. But they're talking about their progress, and they're doing it with more voices. And I think that's a great sign.
Yeah, no, great way to kind of consolidate the thoughts about where this company has been and where they're going. And with that, I'll close here just sharing, if this will let me, but it might not. What I would say is just anybody who, if you're listening and this is new to you, learning about Joby, there's a lot that was put into researching everything up to now, because it used to be very difficult. So if you do check out the website, letstalkjoby.com. It's not to plug anything, but if you go there, it'll default to show you the visual timeline where you can go and click through from 2009 till today and see all the achievements and both announcements. And what's great with that is you can see over time, you'll see something that got announced in 2022, and then what do you know, in 2025, it came to fruition just like they said it would. For instance, flying at the Osaka World Expo in 2025, right? It's like Joby's doing things. Yes, it seems like a slow burn, but they do things that is for the long term. And as an observer and investor, that's what I think is so exciting here. So with that, eVTOL fan, thank you so much for the insights, helping to kind of spurn on this idea and come into fruition. Hopefully, this is something that's helpful for people to just learn about Joby. That's the whole goal of this is, I think once you hear about Joby, it's pretty hard to not get excited about it. And, to my good friend, Arna, Battery Commodity, who kind of started me into the even putting anything on YouTube or X or anything like that. What I think is so cool about eVTOL is, separate from flying cars and this, that, and the other, human beings are just excited by flight. Seeing, an eagle soar, or, I live near, LAX airport, and just seeing how does that even work? If you see a big plane take off, it's kind of remarkable. It seems, still, hard to believe, but it is very real. And so that's what I think also with Joby is this is a new form of transport. People, they see helicopters and that's that, but Joby and S4 is not a helicopter. And so, the passion behind aviation, and I think that'll really start to unlock once you get people into this and to see their city in a different light and, see different areas around and be able to explore more and connect people. Again, that was part of the main mission for Joby and team. So again, with that, I'll close. eVTOL fan, thank you again. Everybody, follow along to Joby Aviation on X. They also put some different things on Instagram too. But just hopefully can grow the community. That's the whole purpose of this. And until next time, we'll see you soon.